Thank you and welcome everyone to FSR's Fellowship Grant Writing webinar. I am going to pass it over now to FSR CEO, Mary McGowan.
Thank you, Tricia. Good day. Welcome to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research Fellowship Grant Writing webinar. I'm Mary McGowan, CEO of FSR. FSR is the leading international nonprofit association committed to accelerating research in sarcoidosis, providing education and support to those living with sarcoidosis and their care partners, and raising awareness about sarcoidosis worldwide. We are thrilled to be joined today by those of you who share our passion in searching for better treatment and cures for sarcoidosis. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. Your phone will be muted. However, we would like to encourage you to ask questions. There is a chat box located in the bottom of your screen. Type your questions into this box throughout the presentation. We will have a question and answer period at the end of this webinar. This webinar will be recorded and will live live on our website. I'm going to take a few minutes to share a bit about FSR and some of our current efforts. FSR was founded over 20 years ago. Since that time, FSR has provided over $6 million in support of sarcoidosis research. FSR is dedicated to providing education, support, and advocacy for patients living with sarcoidosis and their physicians who care for them. FSR has over 60,000 members in our community. Next slide, please. FSR has a four-pronged approach. First, we work to advance and accelerate research in sarcoidosis. FSR has a robust fellowship and grant program to support researchers in the sarcoidosis space. In addition, through FSR's SARC Connect program, FSR works with academic and industry partners to identify willing clinical trial participants and to ensure that all research remains patient-centered. FSR also provides those living with sarcoidosis numerous support opportunities, including wellness programming, social events with others who have similar lived experiences, and one-on-one support through our Patient Navigator program. Additionally, FSR is committed to providing educational opportunities for patients and clinicians in order to provide them with the most up-to-date research and clinical care information in sarcoidosis. Finally, FSR advocates for researchers and clinicians and those living with sarcoidosis by encouraging more funding for sarcoidosis research and working to reduce access challenges. Next slide, please. FSR is proud to work with our esteemed scientific advisory board, composed of world-renowned key opinion leaders within the fields of sarcoidosis, medical research, therapy development, and medical practice. We are very excited about FSR's Global Sarcoidosis Clinic Alliance that launched in April, just last year, not even a year ago. This is a member program consisting of clinics, hospitals, and individual providers who are committed to finding a cure and offering evidence-based patient-centric care for those living with sarcoidosis. To date, 37 institutions have joined the Global Sarcoidosis Clinic Alliance as founding members, and recently we had our very first general member join. As part of the FSR Global Sarcoidosis Clinic Alliance, we offer a variety of clinician programs, including a clinical engagement and education series, a sarcoidosis-specific journal club, medical grand rounds, peer case review, and community engagement commissions. For some of these programs, we offer CME accreditation. African Americans have the highest prevalence and, unfortunately, worst outcomes of those impacted by sarcoidosis. FSR is dedicated in addressing this concern and began our efforts with a robust awareness campaign called Ignore No More. That reached over 500,000 individuals in just a few short months. We were joined by actress Gerald Prescott Galion, who herself is living with sarcoidosis and who shared her story for the very first time publicly after seeing posts about our work that we are producing and amplifying the messaging around this important campaign. Since that time, we have launched phase 2 of the campaign, which focuses on increasing access and diversity in clinical trials. We put out an IRB-approved survey with the hope of getting 250 respondents and ended up with over 400 participants. We have analyzed and begun gathering learnings resulting from those data through our recently held Key Opinion Thought workshop. This month, we will be hosting a patient focus group, and on May 24th, we will be releasing a white paper and hosting a congressional briefing. This congressional briefing will take place the same day as FSR's inaugural Sarcoidosis Crystal Awards Gala, which is taking place on the heels of the American Thoracic Society meeting at Washington, D.C.'s Union Station. We hope that you will be able to join us. I would now like to introduce Tricia Shivas, Chief Strategy Officer, who will provide you with more details on FSR funding and research and the fellowship program to provide you with an overview of FSR's Fellowship Grant program. Tricia?
Thank you so much, Mary. FSR offers many types of funding support. Today, we're discussing the fellowship. However, later this year, we will be announcing funding opportunities for pilot grants and cardiac grants. Next slide, please. FSR also has a robust patient registry with nearly 6,000 participants from over 60 different countries. This registry is fully patient reported and provides a deeper understanding of the patient's experience of the disease, their quality of life, and the socioeconomic burden of the disease. There are opportunities for academic researchers to access these data in the registry. If you're interested, please reach out to learn more from us. Next slide, please. Now let's move to the reason that we're all here today, the fellowship program. FSR's fellowship program began in 2018. However, we are proud to share that since the inception of the fellowship program, FSR has awarded over $1.5 million in support of 7 different fellows. This year, we are seeking applications for a 2-year fellowship that will provide maximum funding of $75,000 per year per fellow. The goal of the fellowship program is to provide early career professionals the opportunity to work closely with a mentor to advance research in the sarcoidosis space. Funding for this fellowship will be provided directly to the research center. These research centers will be required to provide awardees with a stipend to support their fellowship. Applications will be accepted for this grant from both institutions and individuals. Funding is available to support ongoing research or to help launch new innovative research projects in sarcoidosis. Ideal candidates for this grant will be in their first or second year of training focusing on sarcoidosis. Applicants should be able to demonstrate a commitment or intent to pursue a career in the sarcoidosis space. The funding provided must be applied to direct cost only. This may include the fellow's salary and benefits, conference and travel expenses, or the purchase of materials required for the completion of the project. The funding does not cover mentoring efforts. In designing your proposal, please be sure to emphasize relevant research or interest in your own bio. We have seen the most successful fellows have strong mentors who have demonstrated track record in sarcoidosis research. A successful application will be detailed in laying out the mentor's experience, as well as the strategies the mentors will use in training the fellow. Take great care to demonstrate how your institution has committed to supporting this fellowship and the research you are proposing. FSR is committed to accelerating research in the sarcoidosis space. The most successful proposals will demonstrate how their research will help advance and inform future research in this space. Proposals should demonstrate an understanding of the needs in sarcoidosis and an understanding of the history of previous work in this area or the area that your research is focusing on. All fellows must provide progress and financial reports on their research project twice a year. Additionally, all fellows are required to submit a final report and will be invited to speak about their experience and research findings to share with the full sarcoidosis community. All applications are due on 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on March 20th. Decisions about funding will be announced in June of 2023. We look forward to receiving your application, and we will now hear from a successful recipient of the FSR Fellowship funding and their mentor. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Carlos Pardo and Dr. Paula Barreras. Dr. Pardo and Dr. Barreras will provide you some tips and tricks on how to write a successful proposal from previously funded fellow and her mentor. Dr. Carlos Pardo is a professor of neurology and pathology at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. He is a clinician scientist focused on studies in neurosarcoidosis, neuroinflammatory, and autoimmune neurological disorders. His research and laboratory activities center on translational studies evaluating the immunological and immunopathological factors associated with neurosarcoidosis. His clinical work focuses on the study to improve disease phenotyping, diagnosis, and management of sarcoidosis. Dr. Barreras is currently a neurosarcoidosis fellow sponsored by the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Barreras completed her medical school training at the University of Andes in Colombia, followed by a research postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins in neuroimmunology and neuroinfectious diseases. She then completed her neurology residency training also at Johns Hopkins. She is currently a neuroimmunology fellow with an emphasis in neurosarcoidosis, working on identifying potential infectious triggers for neurosarcoidosis. Welcome, Dr. Barreras and Dr. Pardo. We now welcome you to turn on your cameras and begin your presentation.
Thank you, Tricia, so much for the kind introduction. I'll share my screen now. Does it look okay?
Yes, looks good. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll be talking about what makes for a successful FSR grant application. And I'll start by sharing where I was when I started my application. So like Tricia mentioned, I did my neurology residency at Hopkins. I had been exposed previously as a research fellow to sarcoidosis, and I knew I wanted to dig further in this field. But as a last year neurology resident, I was applying for fellowships and discovered that it's useful to come in with funding, especially if it's not an ACGME accredited fellowship, like it's the case for neuroimmunology. And if you want to work in a specific area, then foundations like FSR can provide funding for that fellowship. So that's what I was doing back then. And that was my first time ever writing a grant, actually. So like from my experience, I'll share that it's better to start early. And by early, I'll say at least 3 months before. If you've never written a grant before, you need to identify a good mentor and identify who your collaborators will be, and alert your institution internal grant review committee and financial department. And I made a point of mentioning this because I didn't know, that they have their internal process that also takes time, and it can take sometimes a month to get the submission through the internal committee and to be able to submit. Then your mentor should be ideally somebody who's working in that field, that has research experience, and importantly, that has the time and the personality to be your mentor and to support you in that process. Because sometimes there are people that are experts in the field but may not have the time at the moment to dedicate to the project. If you can establish, in your right granting that you already have a mentor-mentee relationship, I think that is useful because it will tell the reviewers that that relationship precedes this grant, that the likelihood that you continue to have a successful relationship and mentorship is higher. And then you should start brainstorming ideas early on. The first thing to draft is the specific aims and hypotheses. This is one page, but it's probably the page that takes the longest to write and the most important one. The aims should be all hypothesis driven. And this should be discussed, or I encourage you to show this to colleagues and mentors, because feedback is important. And I'll say that I did change my specific aims a few times in response to feedback. The aims should be different from your mentor's grant, but related enough so they can support you. So it shouldn't be a copy-paste of your mentor's R01, but ideally should be in a related area such that they know enough about what you want to do to help you in the process. Now about that aim page, it will start with an attractive and clear title, then a brief introduction of what the problem is that you're trying to solve and why is that important. Then you want to enunciate clearly each aim and the hypothesis, and then briefly explain how are you going to solve that question. There is another section where you go into more detail. So all of these should go in just one page. And like I said, after you draft this page, get feedback. And I encourage you to show this to people that are not directly working with you and that are not directly working in this field, because it's very useful to hear what people understood from what you wrote, which may be very different from what you intended to, the message that you intended to give. And just imagine, a reviewer reading your aims, will they understand clearly what you want to do, which is the goal, right? So like we did circulate my aim page with several colleagues and got feedback that was very useful at the time. So this is the example of the grant that we submitted to FSR. So the title we used was Discovering Pathogens in Neurosarcoidosis, using next-generation immunological and metagenomic methods for unbiased pathogen detection and antimicrobial antibody profiling. So that's a lot, but I liked about the title that it says Discovering Pathogens in Neurosarcoidosis. It's very clear what we're trying to do from the start. And it mentions the novel technology that we're using. And our aims were first to investigate the role of infectious pathogens as triggering factors of the immune response in neurosarcoidosis, and then to determine if that antimicrobial antibody repertoires in neurosarcoidosis correlate with disease activity. So I'll say that the aims should be related, but independent, such that if your first aim fails, or if your hypothesis was not correct, you should still have an aim to develop during your fellowship. So the research strategy is the next step in the grant. This is usually 6 pages, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not a lot of space to say a lot of important things. So the first thing you want to write here is the significance of the project. And here is, what is the knowledge gap? Why is the problem that you're trying to solve important? And how will your project advance sarcoidosis research? After you've said that, then it's important to establish feasibility. And for that, you need to write a project that is practical to complete within the fellowship period, which is 2 years. And the resources that you need for the completion of the project should ideally already be in place, or there should be a plan for them to be in place at the institution you are. And there should be ideally some preliminary data, or at least some literature review showing that the techniques that you're going to use in the grant are valid and have been used for either this problem or similar problems in the past, to show the reviewers that what you're trying to do will probably succeed. Avoid proposing too much or being too broad, because I think that can lead to reviewers to say that it's just not feasible in the 2-year period and then be turned off by the grant. In the research strategy, then you start developing the methods that you're going to use to solve each research question in your aims. So after you've written the significance and the preliminary data, then you again enunciate your aim 1, and then say methods relevant for aim 1, or however you want to phrase it, and just outline what you're going to do from experimental point of view or from analysis point of view to actually solve the question you're asking. And within that, you should write briefly the hypothesis and what the innovation about this aim is. So an innovation refers to what are you adding to the current research that it hasn't been done before, that is worth for the reviewer to support your project for this fellowship grant. Now, in the knowledge gaps in our application, what we wanted to see is what are the biological triggers of neurosarcoidosis. And I did write briefly that there was evidence for infectious triggers of the immunological response in sarcoidosis, and mycobacteria specifically had been associated with the development of sarcoidosis, but not yet proven as a trigger. So I wanted to see if there were specific infectious exposures, specifically mycobacteria, that could be triggers of the disease. And also, since there are no validated biomarkers for disease activity, we wanted to see if we could correlate that immune response to specific infections with disease activity. So I mentioned that you should outline the resources that you're going to have in the institution to prove feasibility. So the resources I used in our proposal included the biorepository of the neuroimmunology division, which already had available biological samples of patients with and without sarcoidosis that were available to me for this project. I also mentioned that we had neurosarcoidosis clinics where I could get clinical training and serve as a referral base for this project, and also access to the multidisciplinary sarcoidosis group at Hopkins. And I mentioned this because this is a training grant, so it's not just about the scientific project, but about your training in sarcoidosis. So I have access to the multidisciplinary group where I'm able to learn also about pulmonology, cardiology, sarcoidosis involvement. Then, of course, I mentioned access to Dr. Pardo's lab and Dr. Pardo himself as a mentor, and the existing collaboration with an expert in the techniques that I wanted to use. And I did show preliminary data where we had used the same techniques in another project to show that we had experience in those techniques. So this is briefly what we're doing with my specific project. So we're using a technology called FIPSeq, or phage immunoprecipitation sequencing, which basically allows for characterization of antibody repertoires of patients or individuals against a broad spectrum of pathogens or of peptides. So we built a platform designed to use FIPSeq specifically with mycobacteria peptides. So that's a mycobacterium peptide library. And we did this, it took several months, but included all the antigenic peptides that have been reported in the available databases from all reported species of mycobacteria. And then we clone that into phages, and these phages end up expressing the proteins of interest. And then after that, we can go with our patient samples and our control samples and expose them to this library, and then figure out by sequencing later which patient reacted to which specific piece of protein of which specific mycobacteria species, and in that way then know if there was a signal for mycobacteria exposures and sarcoidosis, and then we can correlate that with disease activity. I'm showing this figure because I think it's useful also to include figures in the grant. A figure will take some space out of your 6 pages, so plan it well. But figures are worth 1,000 words, and I think if you're looking at, if you're a reviewer looking at a grant, something like this would help them understand better what you want to do. So in the research strategy, once you've developed your methods for each aim, you should briefly state the expected results and impact of your project. So if your hypothesis is correct, what is it that you expect to find, and why is that important? And specifically, why is that important for the sarcoidosis community and for your future career and training? What is the contribution to the field? Because ultimately, a high impact project is what FSR wants to fund, something that actually has relevance for patients living with sarcoidosis. And there are additional documents outside the research strategy and the aims, which is probably the main bulk of the grant, that are important. One of those is the candidate's background. So this is just 1-page personal statement where you outline your trajectory, what led you to apply for this grant, and what your prior experience in research or with sarcoidosis has been. And you probably want to update your NIH BioSketch and not just a regular CV. And I learned in this process that the NIH BioSketch correct template changes all the time. So just make sure that you get the latest one. And then write your career goals and training plan. So this is a little different from the scientific part of the grant, but you should outline what you want to accomplish and learn in the next 2 years, and what the long-term goals are, and outline a specific coursework or dedicated time that you're going to use to learn a specific skill in those 2 years. And for example, in my case, I wanted to obtain additional clinical training in sarcoidosis, and specifically in neurosarcoidosis. So I wrote, I'm going to go to these clinics with this and this person, and in that way be trained as a neurosarcoidosis expert at the end of the fellowship process. Then I wanted to obtain training in data science and bioinformatics, which is necessary to deal with big data like the one this type of technology generates. So I outlined specific courses that I was going to take in statistics and management of biological databases and data analysis. And in addition to that, you want the support letters and your mentor letter. And those letters also take time because your mentors and supporters have their own careers and are busy. So make sure that you let them know that you need this with enough time for them to prepare the letters, and remind them with enough time for them to get back to you, because everything should be submitted by the time of the deadline. In addition, we mentioned that the fellowship grant requires progress reports every 6 months. So I think it's useful to plan your grant and your career development in 6-month intervals, so you have something to report. You have a goal that you accomplished, like this 6-month period, I'm going to finish this course and I'm going to do these 2 experiments. And the next cycle, I'm going to validate the findings from my initial experiments with another experiment, and I'm going to also do the analysis portion of the first part, which I've found useful. And I think that's, that was my experience with the grant. I hope this helps. And I wanted to mention that thanks to this grant, not only I am able, to get my training in neurosarcoidosis and participate in this exciting project, but I was able to get additional funding for the next year of my career. So I was able to obtain a grant from the American Academy of Neurology, also in sarcoidosis. And I think this is directly related to the fact that I already had a grant in sarcoidosis that showed feasibility and showed that I'm fundable in a way. So it's absolutely key to take advantage of these opportunities for the future. And, I plan to apply for a K award moving forward. So thank you to FSR and everyone involved. So with that said, I'll stop sharing and then Dr. Pardo will take over.
Thank you so much, Paula, for that very nice description about the process of generating a project and try to be comprehensive in terms of how to put together a very good proposal. Why to study sarcoidosis? And again, I am a clinician. I am clinician scientist. I basically practice clinical neurology. I also work at the bench, just trying to understand from translational point of view the problems that are associated with sarcoidosis and how to diagnose and how to investigate pathogenic mechanisms of the disease. What I'd like to share with you in the next few minutes is basically the experience that I have when I interact with very bright people like Paula that are very focused and very well located for initiating a research project. And sarcoidosis is one of those diseases that have multiple phases. Sarcoidosis is basically a multi-organ disease. As you can see, many of you probably are from internal medicine or from pulmonology, ophthalmology. We are from neurology. Some of you may have already bench experience, laboratory experience. Some of you may be clinicians with interest in epidemiology or in clinical research. Sarcoidosis is one of those diseases that will give you the opportunity to tackle the research aspect for understanding the pathobiology of this disorder. We can take a look of issues related with imaging. We can take a look at molecular biology of the disease with immunology, pathology, and the clinical questions that are very relevant for understanding the disease. So the most important aspect of all of this conversation is how we can basically put our best effort to make sure that we have successful application, not only for the foundation of sarcoidosis research, but also for other institutions and other foundations that may provide funding. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is just to share some of the ideas and some of the concepts about mentorship and mentor-mentee interactions, and particularly how to keep the focus on the specific research questions. And actually, I have been very amazed about reading about artificial intelligence. So I asked basically the ChatGPT about what is a mentor, and I got a very interesting answer. So a mentor is a trusted and experienced advisor or guide who offers guidance, wisdom to someone less experienced in a particular field or area of life. So you can see there that actually artificial intelligence can define very clearly what is a mentor. But from artificial intelligence definition to the practice, there is a lot of mileage. And this is what I like to tell you a little bit about. So how we start that interaction? That interaction is basically an interaction of two people or several people that are basically going to focus in the specific areas of research, particularly when a question is generated. So we have questions about sarcoidosis. We have questions about how we are able to understand sarcoidosis. And obviously, around that question, there are many ideas, and ideas generate projects. And basically, the relationship mentee mentorship basically start there. When there is a question, there is an idea, there are projects to be discussed. And projects actually require planning, and projects require basically this nice interaction between the people that like to develop that project. And on one side, there is a question, there is an idea, there is this interaction in which the mentor and mentee need to clarify exactly what the rules of engagement are. On the mentor side, you are looking for a person that you trust. You are looking for a person with knowledge, with experience, and that has a passion and commitment. So that is key. So if you are looking for a mentor and you are looking basically to develop a research project and apply and start just trying to move forward with your professional career as a scientist or clinician or investigator, you need to have that support, that commitment. And obviously on your side, you need to have a lot of interest, and you need to show that you are inquisitive, that you have passion for the project and the research question that you plan to address in your projects, and you have commitment. It's extremely important that you demonstrate that there is commitment. If you are applying or you are planning to apply for a project, you need to be committed to the project. It's not only to get the funding, the money, and that's it. You need to complete the project. You need to develop that research project to be able to address the questions that you basically propose in that specific project. And there is one important key is be receptive to feedback. And it's extremely important that the mentor provide the feedback, and it's extremely important that the mentee be receptive to that feedback. And this is a friendship. This is basically a project that will include just the handshaking and the brainstorming about the different ideas. So what is the mentor looking in a mentee? Is basically the profile is the mentee showing interest, showing skills, showing the passion that you have for research, and the mentor need to identify the needs and need to identify the weaknesses. Not everybody is perfect to come to work in a laboratory. Bench work requires learning, and sometimes there are clinicians that go and start working in the lab just with the main goal to gain skills to develop laboratory research. I was a clinician when I was basically starting my research career. I never had training, a PhD training program or anything like that. I came to the lab just to learn how to handle pipettes and how to use a pH meter, or how to do a Western blot analysis, or how to do sequencing, just because I have interest and I have that passion for working in the lab. But I alerted my mentors to say, listen, I have no experience in the lab. You need to let me know and teach me and put me in the program to be trained as a laboratory person. So those are the type of understanding that mentor and mentee need to have. And on the side of the mentor, it's extremely important that the mentor basically identify the career goals. If you are coming to the sarcoidosis research because you like to be a very efficient clinician who understands epidemiology of the disease, that's perfect. If you are a clinician scientist that is coming with a laboratory idea to understand the pathophysiology of the sarcoidosis process, perfect. That is a very good idea. So as I mentioned before, there are different approaches to do research in sarcoidosis. You don't need to be a scientist working full-time at the bench. You don't need to be an epidemiologist working full-time in your databases. You can combine a lot of expertise when you are doing these research projects. Brainstorming ideas is critical, and brainstorming ideas means that you can sit down with your mentee or your mentor, that you can sit down with other colleagues and basically go to the details of what you like to do. It's extremely productive. And understanding and doing brainstorming about projects requires time, dedication, perhaps a lot of coffee. So keep your cup of coffee ready. But it's extremely important to understand what you plan to do. If this is a short project, if this is a long-term project. But for the mentor particularly, it's extremely important to outline the educational resources for the mentee. And if you are looking for a research project, you need to take a look around and see what resources you have for education. You need to learn statistics, you need to learn data management, you need to learn epidemiology. I mean, you need to be aware about the environment where you are going to develop those proposals. But extremely important is you are there because you are going to generate skills and expertise, and your mentor need to provide that resource and need to provide that environment for you to get those skills and expertise. One of the problems that we frequently have is that we come with beautiful ideas, very broad ideas, but one key of research is keep focus. And my role frequently is to tell Paula, stay on the focus of your research. Don't go in different directions. And that is a common denominator for a successful research project is don't get too expansive. Don't include very broad ideas that probably are not going nowhere because you are not focused. So one of the critical roles of a mentor is keep the passion, keep the focus, focus, and focus, because that's the only way that you are able to outline what you are going to do in your research projects. As Paula mentioned before, it's extremely important that you spend time planning your projects. And planning the projects is a bidirectional or multidirectional interaction. You can interact with your mentor, but you can interact with the collaborators. A project at this moment of the century requires a lot of people with different areas of expertise, statistics, molecular biology, immunology, epidemiology. So you need to bring basically the team together to be able to outline a very good idea how you are going to work with the team effort. Because every time that you read a proposal and you see, oh, I'm going to investigate this problem in sarcoidosis, and I'm going to do this, this, and this, if you don't show in your research plan that you have discussed the way that you are going to interact with the team, that means that you haven't been able to do a very good brainstorming about those ideas. So team effort is critical, and you need to show in the paper and your proposal that that process, that proposal that you are submitting for funding has really a good plan of interaction with your team and collaborators, and you are really playing a very important role as a team effort player. And again, it's extremely important you have a very clear trust and transparency with your collaborators. And it's extremely important to have a lot of respect for all the players that are participating in the project. It's extremely important to have that at the beginning, because at the end, when you are writing your paper, you need to understand who is going to be included, what is the location of that paper, authorship, and other things. So that means a lot of trust, transparency, and particularly respect for what you are outlining. It's extremely important you dedicate time how you are going to analyze the data. It's very difficult sometimes when you read proposals and you see that the plan of analysis is weak or there is no plan of analysis. You need to think about how you are going to interpret the data. You need to think how you are going to analyze statistically the data and what is the interpretation of the data. And that is extremely important for the plan and the proposal that you are submitting. How you are going to implement your research project, how you are going to use the resources that you have around to basically make sure that your idea is going to be addressed, the answers that you are looking for are going to be addressed by your project. So implementation, the plan and the approach that you have with the project is extremely important to be very clear, because sometimes that is the major weakness in some of the applications, that there is no clear path for implementation of the project. And make sure that you have a timeline, and each timeline include evaluation of the project process, because it's extremely important that you be able to demonstrate that since the beginning you are checking what is the progress of the project, and that you are checking and evaluating if the project is basically moving forward as you were expected, or if there are problems or pitfalls, you are correcting those problems and pitfalls. It's extremely important for any type of research application that you are going to outline. Now, what you are doing is because you are looking for money, and money is critical for developing research, and money is critical for your career, because you need to survive in academia, you need to survive in the university setting or in the research setting. So you need to basically generate good ideas that are fundable, so you can, and you are in obligation of evaluating how the environment where you are is and what resources you have, and take advantage of everything that you have around. If you have data, repository, registries, if you have basically patient population, cohorts, take advantage of that as a good resource for developing your ideas and your projects. And don't be afraid to include the word pilot project. You sometimes need to make sure that you are doing pilot projects just to check and make sure that your idea is an idea that can move forward, is feasible. So it's extremely important to demonstrate that there is feasibility in your research proposal, and outline very well the collaborations. And as I said before, the approach, the statistical analysis, the bioinformatic support. But extremely important, outline the timelines and the expectations, evaluation of the project during the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. Is extremely important to show that you are prepared to basically correct problems as much the project is moving forward. And again, this is training. This is basically the preparation for your next grant application. You are basically applying to the FSR for a sarcoidosis project that is going to give you an ability to acquire skills and develop your skill as a clinician researcher, and later apply to other grant proposals like K23, K08, or NIH grants, or other foundations grants that will allow you to keep going in your career. Remember, the final goal that we have as a mentors is to facilitate in the mentee expertise development. We basically need to project from our experience and make sure that the mentee is focusing in academic career, in success in academic career, in professional stability, and be productive academically. And that productivity obviously will facilitate the sustainability of the effort, academic effort, and particularly the most important one is independence. So we, as a mentor, we are not basically working to make sure that you keep working in our lab because we need you. No, that is not the role of the mentor. The role of the mentor is try to make sure that your mentee has a success in the academic world and be able to move forward and independent and be able to generate that professional stability that many of us are looking in our lives. So finally, why to study sarcoidosis? I mentioned before, studying sarcoidosis is extremely important because it's allowing us to tackle understanding of a disease that is complex, in which we still have a lot of questions. And let me finalize my statements with the approach that we need to understand is, in the future, you are going to be writing grants to the NIH, and R1s, R21s, and many of the grants that we submit to NIH basically are going to be in the same way as we are doing with FSR. So we're writing grants that are going to generate a good amount of answer to critical questions about sarcoidosis. When you are writing grants to NIH, basically you are going to challenge the reviewer with your application that need to have an overall impact that show that you really are doing a research that is going to be important, that is going to be powerful, and it's going to influence the field that you are doing research. And that basically has at least 5 different components of significance, components of innovation, your qualities as investigator, the approach that you are using, and the environment that you are embedded. So the significance and innovation is basically what you are going to attempt to influence the field where you are doing research. And then the probability that you are going to be successful is outlined by your qualities as investigator, the approach that you are using to the research, the approach that you are using to the project, and the environment. And that's going to be the overall impact of your grant proposal. So keep in mind of the word significance, keep in mind of the word innovation, and keep working hard basically to develop your skills as investigator and the approaches to do the research. And again, it's extremely important to keep in mind that you are trying to answer challenging questions, that you are going to be using innovative approach and try to improve the research environment for sarcoidosis research. So I will stop here, and I hope that that has at least generated some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pardo and Dr. Barreras, for sharing your experiences and expertise in how to be effective in writing these types of grants. I want to encourage everybody to please type your questions into the chat box if you have any questions, and we will begin answering some questions here. We've received a few questions already, and I'm just going to jump right in. Dr. Barreras, how much time did you dedicate to research versus your clinical activities?
So during the fellowship, I did have 70 to 80% of protected research time, which meant I'm in clinic most weeks, one full day, like 2 half sessions, but some weeks I may do a little bit more. But on average is at least 70% dedicated to research.
Great, thank you. Dr. Pardo, do you have any advice on helping a mentee find someone who can help them stay on track? How do they identify that right mentor?
So when you are looking for a mentor, as I said before, you need to identify the question that you like to answer and the people with expertise in the area of research that you are looking for. That is one key. But once you can interact with a lot of people, and remember, one of the key of research is the key of our life, is the same as business, is network connections are important. So you need to keep a very good network if you are a resident, if you are a fellow, if you are a postdoctoral fellow, you are a graduate student. What you need to do is basically to maintain that line of communication and an open mind and connectivity, so you can find the right person or the right group of collaborators.
Great, and just building on that, both Dr. Barreras, Dr. Pardo, can you say a little bit about how you know that you're finding that right relationship for the particular project that you're working on? What are you looking for in building that out?
So I think, I mean, just to follow on what Dr. Pardo just said, once you identify somebody with expertise, I think I'll say just reach out. I know that as a resident or as a early career, person, you may feel intimidated or like, oh, like, they're not going to reply to me. But if you don't reach out, that won't happen. So send an email, have a coffee with people and just get a feel of the personality and of the willingness of people to participate and generate enthusiasm around your ideas. Because I think once you sit down with somebody and talk, you'll see if there is a connection, which is important.
And I will basically knock at the door. If the door is not open, knock again. If they don't open, basically look for another door. It's extremely important because people claim that they are busy all the time, and we are busy. You know very well that we are busy. But I think that there is 2 words that you need to look for. One is commitment, and the second one is passion. And the mentor and the mentee need to have both. I mean, those are the qualities that both persons need to have.
Thank you for that. Another question that we have is, since this, and Dr. Pardo, I think you did a nice job of covering all the different pieces that your grant needs to have in thinking about it, but 2 of them are in some ways a little challenging or based on this question. How do you make sure that your aims are achievable and you're being innovative? What is your recommendations for either one of you, if you can chime in on that?
It's a very good question. Innovation means if you are answering a very challenging question with novel approach. So let me give you an example. So Dr. Barreras was investigating how mycobacteria may impact a patient with sarcoidosis or may trigger sarcoidosis in a patient. So if you take a look, how do you do assessment of mycobacteria infection? You can go and do a skin test, or you can do a blood test with a T-spot or a quantiferon test. But if your Dr. Barreras come to me and say, I like to do T-spot in all patients with neurosarcoidosis, and I say, But if Dr. Barreras come and say, there is a new technique that basically is innovative in the way that is going to give me the antibody profile of the patient response against mycobacteria antigens, I will say, oh, that is a very good idea. Let's try to do that. So in other words, you need to find the right question, and then you need to look for the right methodology, the right approach. And innovation means that just bring something that really is able to answer that question correctly. You are looking for an answer in the 21st century. Don't use basically tools from the 20th century.
Yeah, and for feasibility, I'll say get feedback, because you may think that, especially if you've never written grants before and early in your career, that all your ideas can be done, and that anything can happen in the lab, and a lot of things can happen in the lab. But I think your mentor will help you, understand what's too broad or not doable, and if as you show it to other people, they'll say, like, I've worked in this, and actually that takes 5 years to complete and not 6 months. And like that. So I think if you get feedback from multiple people, you'll get a better idea of feasibility.
The best way to filter feasibility is to reach to people that have experience with the different topics of research that you are planning to do. And that is very critical. So that is part of the brainstorming. If you are planning to investigate a question and you are planning to use tools or different methodology, reach to people that have used those methods before to see, is this going to help me to answer this question? Again, you are in the process of research training. You are in the process of building up new ideas. So you need to reach to people that have already experience with the disease or the methods or the approach that you plan to use, because that is probably the best filter to make sure that the reader of your grant proposal agrees with you, because that is what you are trying to do. It's just you are selling an idea to a reviewer. So that is important.
Thank you both. And that kind of leads to one of the other questions that we had, which is specifically around trying to make sure if you need to, can you have a team that's available to you? So obviously, Dr. Pardo, you are the direct mentor, but is it possible in a grant like this to have others as a team? Can you guys speak to that?
Yes, it's absolutely helpful to have commentors if your grant proposal include a combination of methodological approaches or other techniques that requires expertise from other specialties. So that is very critical and very important. Paula?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I did assemble a team. So Dr. Pardo is the main mentor in my life in general, but in this project. But we did partner with Dr. Ben Larman, who's an expert in the techniques that I'm specifically using in the lab. And I got a support letter from him saying that he was going to collaborate in the project. I did partner with the clinical sarcoidosis experts that were going to help me in my clinical training, and obtained support letters from them. So it's really not just Dr. Pardo, but it's been a team of people supporting me throughout this past couple of years.
Let me expand on that answer. That is not only for FSR, that applies to all grants that you are writing. If you are writing a grant to NIH, NIH reviewers are going to take a look of the letter of support for that grant. And it's extremely important, if you mention to use a technique in which you are collaborating with somebody, that person should write a letter of support stating that they are able to collaborate with you in that specific idea. So it's extremely important to keep in mind that collaborators are critical for research projects, and that is a very essential part of outline the approach that you plan to use in your proposal.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, both of you, for sharing your expertise and your experiences with those that are attending today's webinar. And we are short on time. I'm sure this conversation can continue to go on, but we are short on time. And I do want to just close out with a few different things for everyone to be aware of. Today's webinar will be available. The recording will be sent out if you wanted to review it again and look at the tips that were provided to you. And you will be able to continue to do that. We encourage you to please join our physician and investigator community. We send out a monthly newsletter, and there's an opportunity for you to learn about not only this research opportunity, but other opportunities that FSR provides, as well as other opportunities from NIH and other funders. So do join that community so you can learn more, as well as really exciting programs that we're doing, like an upcoming clinical engagement series event that you should be aware of. And you'll get more information on that soon. We're putting out information on that soon. As a reminder, the fellowship applications are due March 20th at 11:59 Central Time. And to learn more, please visit www.stopsarcoidosis or reach out directly to me or anyone on the team. My email is there, Trisha@stopsarcoidosis, or you can send an email to info@stopsarcoidosis, and the team will direct you to where you need to be. And then just as a reminder, we have additional grant opportunities that are going to be opening up soon for the pilot grant and the cardiac grant as well. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing all the wonderful applications. And thank you again to Dr. Pardo and Dr. Barreras for your guidance and expertise.
Thank you, Trisha. Thank you so much for all the support that FSR is giving to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.